Hey everybody, this is Timothy Gay here with another review. Today we're going to look at Secrets from Bruno Faidutti and Mr. Eric Lang. This is a hidden role, hidden team, social deduction game where you're trying to figure out what side everybody's on and try to get the most points at the end of the game. There's 3 different roles, and at the beginning of the game you'll be dealt one of these nice, thick, chunky tiles. You've got the KGB, and then the CIA, and then you have the hippies. Now the goal of the KGB and of the CIA is to get the most points at the end of the game, which come from these cards. See, they have points total. This card's worth 5 points at the end of the game. The goal of the hippies, or hippie, usually there's one, depending on player count, is to have the least amount. They are not on a team. So if there's 2 hippies, they're in competition with each other. They want to have the least amount individually. So they are not on a team. So these are dealt out at the beginning. This chart in the rule book tells you what amounts to deal out. This plays 4 to 8 players. So at 4 players you would have 2 KGB, 2 CIA, and 1 hippie. And you say that's more than 4 tokens. Well, one of the rolls is going to be randomly dealt out face down. One of the rolls will be dealt to the middle of the table next to this tracker board here, face down. So there's an extra roll. Now, depending on the number of players, you start the game in a different way. So 4 players, you look at your own token, you flip it over secretly and look at it. So I would be on CIA. 5 or 6 players, you look at your own, and then you also look at the person's on your right. 7 to 8, you look at your own, person on the right, and then the center is revealed for everyone, and it's flipped back face down. Now, for the rest of the game, you can no longer look at your own token unless, a roll lets you do it or something like that. Now, what is a roll? This is the guts of the game. These cards drive what actions happen throughout and kind of help players figure out whose team is on whose, sabotage people, assassinate people, different things like that. So on a player's turn, they would flip over the top 2 cards. This is open information to everyone at the table. They would take these little markers here, look at the ones they revealed, and they would mark them right there. And then secretly, without anyone else knowing, select one of these. So let's say they selected the journalist, and they would offer it to someone else at the table. Now at the beginning of the game, you're not going to know who's on whose team. You might know some at the higher player counts, and that kind of keeps the game moving quickly. This is a brisk game, so a little bit more information at the beginning so that it doesn't bog down. So let's just say there's an invisible person there. I offer them this, and now they must decide if they want to accept my offer or decline my offer. Now if they accept the offer, flips over and goes in front of them, and they would trigger the ability of the card. And we'll get into the abilities in just a minute. There's a bunch of them. The symbology kind of shows you it. Once you've played a few times, it'll maybe probably just after the first game, you'll know what the symbols mean. You'll know everything. It's very simple. Let's say Mr. Invisible here decided not to take it. Well, then I, the person that offered it, would have to put it in front of me. And then I would trigger the ability. So there's a good deal of bluffing in this game because you're wanting to manipulate other people to the best of your, to give you a better advantage. And remember, some of these are worth a lot of points. So if you're wanting to win, unlike the hippies, then 5 points is a huge chunk. This little handy chart in the middle kind of is a way to track what came out that turn. That's all it's for. You don't get to track, how many are left of each card. So you do that. Let's just say Mr. Invisible has been building up cards in front of them they have the journalist. And then let's say it's my turn again. I've got the opportunity here to really, if I've maybe figured out they're on the opposing team or something like that, I want to sabotage them here. Now, they get to see this, remember, so it's a big risk for them to take this, and I'll tell you why. Because I secretly pick one of these. Let's just say I give them the journalist in secret. They accept it. Well, it goes face up in front of them. If you ever have a copy, they flip over, okay? And now they're worth nothing at the end of the game. What causes the end of the game? The end of the game results in someone having 5 cards in front of them, face up, face down, assassin cards, which we haven't got to yet. Once 5 of any cards are in front of somebody, that triggers the end game. Okay? So, then, it ends immediately, too. You don't get to go around the table again, so you got to be very careful. A lot of situations you'll get into with people getting 4 cards and things like that, and multiple people having 4 cards, and then it gets really tricky, and you're worried they may just take a card just to end the game. One thing is there's a whole bunch of different roles here. So the helpful thing to do is, especially the first game, is make sure you get these player aid cards out in front of people, because they're going to not know what it is, and it's going to bog the game down a little bit. That's my only complaint, is I kind of wish it had the words instead of the symbols, because the symbols are pretty wacky at the beginning. But like I said, 1 or 2 games, and this game plays really, really quick, and everybody's up and running, and it's no big deal. There's only 8 roles to learn, So why don't we go through some of these roles? Oh, one thing before we get to the roles. The UN. This is one of the coolest parts of the game, in my opinion. So what will happen is people are acquiring cards around the table because offers are going around. They're either going to or from the people. As soon as any one person has less cards in front of them than everybody else, they are given this UN token. Right side up. And while they have the UN token, if they're not involved in an offer, they can say, I'm taking that card. So let's say I was trying to give this card face down to Mr. Invisible here. Mrs. Invisible's over here, and she says, I remember there's 2 cards that they did. I know Mr. Invisible's on my team. I think this is going to be bad, but it would be better for me to take it. Or if they think it's something bad and they're a hippie and they're like, yeah, I want that. All right, rock and roll. They would say, nope, I'm taking that card. And they could just take the card, and it goes to them, and they get to do it. Now, that's like a one-time thing, because it's only when they have strictly less cards. Now, if they remain less cards, they get to keep using it. So there's an advantage to not have... It's kind of a catch-up thing, a little bit, which is pretty unique. But it's only when they're not an active player, because it's an interrupt thing. And they have a really cool little chart here. Do you want a card? United Nations intervenes, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty cool. So that's one thing. 5 cards ends the game. The cards. Let's just go through them. Politician. The politician is tricky, because if you accept the politician, he's not going to go in front of you. You're going to actually have to give him to someone else and then look at their role. So it's a good little tricky way to kind of, figure out somebody else's role, but you're also giving them 3 points. So you got to be careful who you give that to. But it's a surefire way to figure out who they are, for now at least. They might get switched around. The assassin, worth nothing, but that player that activates it is going to take one of these cards. They'll take the top card, and they'll just blast somebody. So they don't get to look at this card. This will stay face down in front of them, and these bullet cards run a range of 0, I think it's -3, -1, -2, -3. So, if you're a hippie, it's great. This would be great to get assassinated. If you're on the other teams, you don't know, and this counts towards one of the 5, so you don't know if it's the worst case scenario, because you'll start by the end of the game. Pretty much everybody will know who everybody is, but they won't know what to give everyone. So say my KGB friend here, I'm on the KGB, has this bullet in front of him. I don't know if we're winning at the time. Should I end the game by taking the 5th card? I don't know if it's -3. That would make us lose. That's the tricky situations with the assassin. That's what makes that so cool in this game. It's another layer. Journalist. So the journalist lets you, well, you have to reveal your token to all players without looking at it yourself. So you may have been switching in the game, you don't know it, and you show it to everybody else, and you're like, I was a CIA, and all this stuff. So everyone will know what you are. So you don't want to really get that. It could be bad, but it could also, you know, if you're on the team of some other people, not the hippie, they may be able to start helping you. And hopefully you know what you are at that time when you show it. So, scientist. The scientist is pretty cool because when you add a second scientist, the first scientist you get does nothing. The second scientist you get makes you flip all your cards over to nothing. So the scientist is very funny to sabotage who you think is on the other team. You don't want to do it to the hippies because that would net them 0 for all the things. The hippies really want scientists. So if you're a hippie, you could try to pretend to be on somebody's team and be like, give me that scientist for 5 points. Now, it's important to note that it's only the second scientist. So the first one, if you can keep it, 5 points, great. You know, you try not to get swindled into losing everything, unless you want to. The diplomat. So what you would do is reveal the identity token in the center of the table so that everybody can see it. And then all their players must close your eyes, and then you decide if you're going to switch yours with switch the token of the player directly on your right or left with that center token. So it's a little bit of, you know, that's some of the tomfoolery that can go on, because say somebody's got a scientist and then maybe later on you switch them and they don't know it, and then you're like, okay, I got a scientist here and this other thing. I won't give you the scientist. I'll give you this. Boom, I tricked you with the diplomat, switched you. Now all your cards are 0. I've seen that happen a lot. So the diplomat's not worth much, but, man, pretty powerful. Oop, another diplomat. Journalist again. I probably should have separated these out. Psychiatrist. He's worth a -1 point, which is great. And if you're the hippie, I meant to say, the psychiatrist, you get to swap 2 other players' identity tokens. So it's a great way to say you see, you figured out 2 people at the table's roles, and you want to be on the team of the person with the most points. You could switch them, you know. Try to get, because remember at the end, it's all combined. So all the KGBs combined, everything like that. Let's see. Get to detective. Sorry. Detective's worth -2 points, but you secretly get to look at 1 identity token. It can be your own. It could be the token in the center. It could be any players at the table. So bad points-wise, but that's because the ability's so good. Once you've learned someone's identity, you can really mess with them or really, you know, beef them up if you find out they're on your team. Let's see if we can get to the next. I think this is the last one. The double agent, worth 2 points. Pretty cool. So what does the double agent do? He swaps identity token with identity token in the center, and then you get to secretly look at your new token. So it's a gamble. This one probably causes the most chaos because you don't know if you accept this or get it. You know, they deny it. It's a gamble because you don't, unless you know what's in the middle. And remember, we can figure out what's in the middle through different cards. So this would be one maybe if you figured out what's in the middle and you know that you want someone else to become that, or you know that you want to become that. So hopefully they'll, you know, resist the offer. And that's it. So like I said, there's not a ton of rolls, but there's some really cool combinations between the rolls that you can it kind of feels like you're worming your way through this rather than the overall objective of figuring out who everyone is. that's not really the goal of this game, and that is what makes it more of a unique social deduction game, where it's more of a card-driven type of thing. It's not all about figuring out who is who. A lot of it is manipulating each player's tableau once you have figured out. So there's more than just, there's a lot of games out there where you go, oh, well, you're the bad person. We figured it out. We've all voted you're the bad person. That's the whole game, which those games are great. But I like that this has a different wrinkle to it because there's a ton of social deduction games on the market. But the uniqueness of how the cards and the social deduction part, the hidden bluffing part, the bluffing is awesome in this game. I really, it's so tense when people get up to 4 cards and you're trying to figure out how in the world can I win, because maybe you abandon your former teammate at the last minute just to win. So there's a lot of kind of, you never can trust somebody that was your teammate at the beginning that you figured out. So all of that adds up to a really awesome game. Tiny little box. You can take it anywhere. 4 to 8 players, and it plays really, really well at 4 players. It's hard to find a game, social deduction game, that plays at the minimum level and plays just as well as the bigger levels, because I almost like this best at 4 players, which, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I like the control that you can have at 4 players. It does get a little more chaotic beyond that. But everything in here, the components, awesome. The card art is so cool. Everything's really clear, legible. I like that you have this center track with the reminders, because, it's a party style game. You're typically going to be playing this, and it might be noisy and things like that, so you don't have to keep saying, what were the 2 you flipped over? What were the 2? What were the 2? You mark them. That at first I was like, why would you do that? But you definitely want to do that. I like how it plays a little bit different at all the different player counts. I like that it plays quick. I like that it's light. I just really like it. One last thing. The designers are in the game, and they say make up your own rules for these cards. Pretty funny. Or they could be nothing, not worth any points either. But that is Secrets, one of my favorite games to come out last year, and I highly recommend picking it up. It's very affordable. I think around the $20, $25 range. Go get it. Awesome.